Baird, who will take us through the presentation. Thanks, Kriss.
Thanks very much, Faye. So first of all, I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me loud and clear. If anybody can't, then please let me know. So welcome to today's webinar titled Using Design Thinking to Improve Learning Products and Services. My name is Kriss Baird, and I'm one of Faye's colleagues working with UFI Trust. So I want to start with this little thought idea, this concept that most new ideas are neither attractive nor complete. How many times have you tried the latest or greatest and newfangled technologies, and for whatever reasons it just didn't live up to your expectations? In the world of innovation, and particularly technology innovation, this is all too common. More often than not, projects and products and services are built with some fairly considerable flaws, which means that the general population, the majority of us, just wouldn't ever consider trying to adopt them. Well, what do I mean? Well, if you remember, just a few short years ago, Google, Epson, and other tech giants would have had us thinking that just around the corner we would all be wearing this very funky and functional new type of eyewear. It didn't really happen, did it? For a number of reasons. You know, there was a few people that obviously would have loved to have worn these augmented goggles for everyday use, but again, it hasn't happened. Perhaps because the form didn't fit the function, right, or otherwise, or there was just other flaws that people picked up. That's not to say that innovation in this instance may not be adopted in the future, but it's very clear that the first prototypes and the first versions of these sorts of designs that the general public got to get their hands on just weren't really fit for purpose. It's also just an opportunity for me to be a little bit silly. So before we actually get into the meat and bones of what we're talking about today, I would really like you guys to answer a quick poll question. So hopefully my trusted assistants, Faye and colleagues, would have been able to get the poll up and running by now. I'm just trying to find it. Here we go. Fantastic. Perhaps you could just help us to understand a little bit about who's on the call today. So I'm quite keen to understand, of these four, which represents you best. Perhaps you could click on your screens and select one of the options here. Faye, I might have struggled to display the results.
Hi, Kriss. Yeah, so we can see that 84% of people have voted, 89% now, and it looks like we've got 53% are tutors, 35% are other learning providers. We've got 29% are learning provider, e.g. from FE College, and 6% tech team.
Fantastic. That's really, really useful. Thank you very much. Right, that just helped. Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate you contributing there. Well, that certainly helps me to understand a little bit about the makeup of who's on the call, and I'm sure some of the things that we're going to talk about today, you may well have had some experience in terms of you can relate to. Now, I mean, just to give you just a little quick background on myself, I've been working with UFI Trust for a number of years now. I consider myself to be a technologist, more so than an educator. Though I do train entrepreneurs, I work with a lot of startup teams to help them to better understand, you know, the problems that they're trying to solve and who they're trying to solve these problems for, and then taking them through processes which helps them to refine and sharpen their value propositions and you know, the value that they provide to people such as the majority of the people that are on this call today. Often, you know, educators, learning providers, and customers that are looking to adopt new solutions in response to particular challenges that they're having. So that's a little bit about me. I'll move on from this fairly jovial picture, and we'll get into the main of the content today. So again, I'm going to start with a couple of thought exercises, really, and this idea that really, in order to create value for your business, you really need to create value for your customer. But the only way to really sustainably create value for your customer is that you're able to generate and create value for your business. And all too often, innovators maybe sharpen the stick of part of their value proposition, or think that they've got a really great idea until they release it out into the wild and put it into the hands of the customers, who kick the tires on it, try it and try to break it, or try to use it to its full capacity and extent. And for whatever reason, maybe similarly to the Google glasses or Epson glasses that I showed just a minute ago, it's that there are barriers to adopting it, and therefore it becomes just another piece of dusty technology that's put away into the cupboard, or an application that just isn't used to any real sort of significant extent. So kind of keeping this in mind, there, what is the reason for this? Why is it that innovators often don't hit the mark squarely or correctly for customers to want to use and adopt their products? Well, more often than not, or in so many cases, entrepreneurs and innovators, haven't spent enough time really defining what the needs are of the users and the customers that they're trying to create value for. They might have a really great idea and maybe some first-hand experiences of the problems that they're trying to solve, but unless enough people are consulted, unless enough of the end users or the audience that you're trying to improve conditions for and produce innovation for, unless they're really closely involved and heavily in the mix for product design and development, in all too many cases, the company produces products that the customer just doesn't want to buy. So some of today, or for the majority of today's content, I'm going to go through a number of steps and a couple of different methodologies that really helps innovators that are either looking to produce or to adopt innovation, to think about steps that they can take to better understand the needs of the people that they're trying to create value for. Okay, so bear with me just a minute, guys. I don't want this this graph to blind anybody by science too early on into this this webinar, but this is the technology adoption life cycle. And what it basically sets out is that, us in the general public and the population, we sit into one of a few categories, either we're innovators that are really kind of happy to try out very early stage innovations that maybe are very buggy, are very messy, that don't work very properly, but are happy to try it out because they're motivated to try all the new technologies, whether or not it works. Or they might be visionaries, people that maybe adopt or try things just after maybe it's been introduced. So I would probably put myself into the class of, and I don't mean to sound to sound above myself, but I would say, so I would sort of sit in the visionary category. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a techie, I'm not someone that's able to be the first person to try out a new technology. Chances are it's going to come to me and get to me afterwards. That category is also known as the early adopters. But for the most people most people sit in either the early majority, the late majority, or the laggards, the pragmatist herd, as it were. And I guess, you know, if you think about your own role and you think about the exposure that you've had to trying out new products and services, ask yourself the question: when you've tried out a new fangled technology or a new type of approach and it hasn't worked as you've expected it, have you accepted that? Have you just moved on? Have you put it aside and never come back to it ever again? Or have you, you know, put it aside and only come back to it once you know that it really works? That's in my experience, that's often the case with edtech and voctech. We operate in quite you know, an ambitious and inspiring field, but unless it's able to actually do what it says on the tin, or actually help out in some sort of way, and address the need that we have, all too often it's going to be put to one side, and maybe it won't get touched again until all those bugs are sort of ironed out. So I think it's important that, you know, we consider who are the users and what skills do they currently possess in maybe using technology, or their experience of trying to use technology. And, you know, for those that are producing innovation in this space, there are deeper questions to ask than, you know, just does this learning objective translate well to a digital type of delivery, whether it's an app or a platform or anything else. There are other sorts of markers of value which we'll come to a bit later on, and reasons for why something or a new technology would be adopted over another. And then finally, you know, what are the reasons for any of these types of people for finding a solution? These are all just sort of questions just to sort of ponder on. But this technology adoption life cycle, it's very much an accepted graph. It was established by a chap by the name of Jeff Moore, who says that for early stage innovators, there's a chasm to cross. And so many companies fall into the chasm and never climb out of the chasm because they simply don't produce enough value to help them to then convince the early adopters and the early majority to continue or even try using the product, which then helps to bring across the rest of the herd, so to speak. But as I said, don't just take my word for it. Just 2 days ago, EdTechX, one of the world's largest education technology innovation conferences, one of their founders held a keynote session, and he talked about the technology adoption life cycle having been fast-tracked and having fast-tracked many years worth of challenges just during the last few weeks. How many of us have been forced to try new approaches in order to deliver the teaching and learning that, you know, is important for our day-to-day and the roles that we hold. Okay, so moving on. What is design thinking? So design thinking is a methodology that was first popularized by a design agency called IDEO. They're a very large and world famous design and innovation agency. And essentially what they have done is they have incorporated or combined the scientific method and the approach of scientific thinking with the processes of design. And you know, in practice, that sounds very fancy, but when you break it down, what it means is that, you know, they spend time rigorously applying a method that better understands and investigates and experiments with, you know, concepts that they're trying to validate. And so the first step is to empathize, empathize with the user or the customer or the target audience that you're trying to better understand, to put yourself into their shoes and understand more about their behaviors, their conditions, their reasons for wanting to try something new, or their reasons for doing anything in that instance. What behaviors they have that sort of impact their decisions and their abilities to sort of do any one thing, or any number of things. You know, to understand what are their frustrations and their difficulties in being able to achieve their objectives in any sort of given sort of set of objectives. And you know, what would good look like? What would you know, what would be useful as a solution to the problem? Once the empathy and empathizing has been sort of conducted, and there's then an opportunity to sort of define and better define and put some some markers in and flags in the sand that help you to be confident that you understand what the needs or the problems that the users and audience have. And from there, we're able to come up with some ideas, you know, any number of ideas on how you might solve those problems. Now, at that point, you may well begin to prototype. You may begin to start building something. It could be, you know, just in terms of paper prototypes, sketching out ideas and presenting those ideas to your audience. Or, you know, you might be crudely trying to build something with sticky tape and string, or you know, maybe more complex technical approaches to actually get something that's tangible and usable into your audience's hands to be able to test. And yeah, so that's the general basis for the methodology of design thinking. You start with putting yourself into the shoes of the user and the audience member that you're trying to better understand. You might categorize these audiences into different groups, again, which we'll come to shortly. And then you go through these steps and maybe cycle back to them if your assumptions haven't yet been confirmed. Now, the double diamond approach is another design methodology. The double diamond approach was established by the UK's Design Council, and essentially it is a very, very similar methodology to the sort of form and flow that I just showed you before. But it's called the double diamond approach because in the first instance, in the first quarter of the double diamond approach, you encounter the discovery phase, which is all about trying to gain, as it says there, insight into the problem or the need. And as you're building this insight, essentially you're fanning out with your investigations and your questioning to maybe capture insights into many problems, into more problems than just the one that you started with, in order to better understand the priority of problems that your audience has. So, you know, what do I mean by this? Well, you might start with an assumption that the most important component or the most important point to your customer or audience is X. But actually, once you've spoken to them about it, you actually understand that X comes further down the pecking order than Y. So, you know, does it make sense that you put all of your eggs into one basket and just try to address just X? Or does it make more sense to better understand how impactful are each of the problems and how challenging are they to the audience, and then try to maybe focus efforts on looking for solutions to the most important problems? So again, the first quarter is about trying to gain insights and not being wedded to any one particular area. And when you get to the second quarter, the define stage, you're then beginning to fan in, to focus in order to better understand the priority of problems that you're there to focus in on. And then when you get to this middle point, at that point you should have a very clear understanding as to what the types of problems are and how problematic they are for your audience. At which point you would then look to start prototyping potential solutions. But you know, the process of innovation is muddy and it is messy and very much iterative. So you might not get it right first time. In fact, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get your first prototype completely right. And therefore, you know, there might be a number of different avenues in which to explore, and a number of different approaches and methods or types of solutions that you might produce in order to test with your audience. And then the final quarter, once you've understood the range of solutions and potential options that are available to you and to your audience, to address the needs and problems that you've defined, at that point you can then test those with your audience in order to be able to, you know, focus in on and refine and optimize those prototypes so that they produce a solution and an outcome that's suitable for your audience. So you can sort of see you know, these are sort of virtuous cycles of testing, of learning, and then or building, testing, and then learning, and then cycling back. So, you know, maybe coming back to the concept of design thinking, as you can see, it follows a fairly similar sort of flow. What I have added here, you may have noticed, is that this final stage of test, rather than it just, you know, if the previous slide showed that there was an endpoint, but the endpoint really only comes once you've been able to confirm and validate, and to some extent prove that your project, your prototype, your approach has actually solved the problem. Until that point, you're likely to be engaged in a continuum of experimentation, a cycle of testing and prototyping, hence the circle at the end. Okay, how are we doing? Cool. So persona profiling, this is another technique and a valuable technique that I would encourage, you know, anybody that's involved in trying to adopt innovation or producing innovation should be considering, because it is critical as a method of being able to understand who it is that you're trying to produce value for and how you're trying to design something that creates a suitable outcome for your target audiences. So what do I mean by persona profiling? Well, there are a number of different categories for personas. In this instance, I'm showing you 6 key categories. They are influencers, which are individuals or groups who are very much listened to, who can influence opinion. And I'd like you to consider, you know, all of the different sorts of organizations and stakeholders and actors that are in your field, and think about where you know, each of these personas perhaps is relevant, and who you might know, who are the individuals that you might know that might sit into these categories. So as I said, individuals are groups that are listened to and that can influence opinion. You have recommenders, people who search and evaluate, making formal recommendations for or against purchases. We have buyers, those who control the budget and obviously make the actual purchases. Decision makers, they are those that are ultimately responsible for the choice of product or services. Often they're the ones with the final budget authority. So they could be buyers as well. Often they are. Otherwise, you know, they're the ones that help to inform the buyers. End users are obviously, you know, I'm sure most of us will have encountered many of these. These are people that are using the sorts of solutions, products and services that we're trying to create. And then we have this very interesting shadowy character at the end, the saboteur, and it immediately conjures up images of Dick Dastardly tying down Roadrunner to the train tracks and trying to blow him up with dynamite. But honestly, they really aren't bad people. The saboteurs are more often than not, those people that just need more help in order to better understand how to use the products and services, they are not bad people. They are often just the ones that are least confident and competent in using products and services, and they have the potential to derail the project, only because the product and service just doesn't work for them. If you remember that technology adoption life cycle, if you think about the sort of second half of that cycle, so the curve that is the long tail. So if you think about the second half, and that have been the late majority and the laggards, these are the people that really don't want to try new approaches until they work really well, until they work perfectly, or until they've had the bugs ironed out, so that the saboteur doesn't feel like it isn't producing the value that they need. Just 1 second, guys. I just need to shut my door. Two seconds. Sorry. Thanks for waiting there. So saboteurs, as I said, they're not bad people. You just have to consider these types of people, and this category of persona as maybe those that need even more support. So let me put this into the context of VocTech and attempting to design new products and services. How often have you either tried to introduce a new product or service, or had someone thrust upon a new approach to you, and when you tried it, there was no instructions on how to actually set it up, or you got it set up but then you just got stuck and there was no obvious area to find out, or no obvious destination or place or person to consult to help you understand how to get over that hurdle? Well, often that's a question of really poor design, and the producers of that product or service haven't thought enough about catering to those that really need the most support. And so what I often tell businesses that are producing innovation in education is that if you're able to really think about your onboarding and the first initial steps that your customers and users need to go through to become confident and competent users of your product, if you can really tackle that, maybe with really good tutorials or how-to guides, or step-by-step processes and decent FAQs and learning resources to better understand how to use your products and services. If you can produce those as a key feature of your product, then more often than not, you're going to address the saboteur's concerns that the product doesn't work, or that it's too complicated to understand, and that it will never work in practice. If you can provide them with all those resources to help them feel confident and competent at using it, more often than not, they can quickly turn into your biggest evangelists. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the other personas for the time being, but I am going to just drill down into how you actually create a persona, and this can help to inform design thinking and the design thinking methods. So I want to give you an example. It's a really fun process, and I would encourage anybody that's involved in innovation projects to think about putting together a persona. This essentially is an opportunity to create a reference person, something that you and your team can have in your mind's eye at any one point, and you don't need to just refer to them as the customer or the user or the L&D manager in this case. It's about creating a sort of narrative, a real life story around what you think their motivations and their drivers for getting up in the morning and maybe looking for a solution to their problem, and if you want better understand their needs, what their goals are and their pain points, even if it's just you coming up with that amongst your team or on your own, that can be a very useful starting point in which to start testing some assumptions. right? So in this instance, we have Carol. She's a learning development manager. She's 35 years old. She earns £40,000 a year. These are just, you know, ideas really. These are just to kind of create some sort of profile of who we're talking about. And I've given a name, Carol, so that I can always refer to Carol. She's Carol. She's the learning development manager. She's part of the audience that we're trying to reach. And we know that she is ambitious and she wants to see that her employees' workplace education is strong and great. But really, she's unconfident in this shift to remote learning. You know, if we look down the list of goals, needs, and pains, one of the things it points out is that, you know, she needs to deliver results that relieve her worry and maximizes employees' time and productivity. What she finds difficult is being able to understand which projects and which products and services are the ones to go for. She doesn't know the differences between what good and bad looks like at the moment. Maybe she needs to be influenced by a recommender, for example, or someone else, or have someone else road test a number of products and make recommendations to her. But nevertheless, she finds it difficult to be able to understand the difference between good and bad. And she also finds it difficult to encourage and motivate employees that are finding it challenging to do learning in their own time. So the reason why this is a very useful starting point is that, you know, there are a whole host of potential problems and challenges that a VocTech product might seek to address here. And having an opportunity to put a flag in the sand and create a persona, and I would say in this instance, if we go back to the previous slide, I'd say we would say Carol is probably a decision maker in this instance, right? She's the learning development manager that might have had some sort of influence from or recommendations from colleagues about products and services, but as the L&D manager, she's ultimately responsible for the delivery and provision of training on to her employees and colleagues. So coming back to Carol, thinking about how to put together a story, as I said, gives you an opportunity to then go out and test these assumptions. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the sorts of typical pain points that customers experience when they're trying new products and services, or just trying to overcome the day-to-day battles of work life. Yeah, often they are cost related, whether that's time or money, human effort and resource, you know, challenges. Maybe there are headaches, and that you know, they're just very, very difficult things about the job. Let me give you for instance. If I was put into a classroom of, say, 60 apprentices, I would struggle, even over the course of a term or two, to remember everybody's names. I know that sounds really trivial and silly, but that could be a frustration to both me and actually present a difficult and challenging user experience for the learner. If every single time you walk into the classroom and your teacher doesn't know what your name is, that can make you feel you know, awkward or unmotivated or damaging to your self-esteem. So my point being is that, you know, even the most trivial things could be considered as frustrations and having other sorts of impacts which maybe weren't first well understood. Maybe there are performance issues with the current solutions that they're trying to use. How many of us have tried to use virtual learning environments and they're just really challenging? They're really tricky to deal with. Or you know, we've tried other sorts of products and services outside of the realms of VocTech, and for whatever reason, it was just very challenging to try to use or adopt. Maybe there are like very, very specific issues, and these could be, you know, related to social components, right? Being able to make sure that everybody has the right equipment and that can do remote learning, making sure everybody has access to devices so that you know, that there aren't going to be those barriers to learning. Maybe there are technical issues with the prototypes or the products or whatever that they're using, Or maybe there's financial challenges. It's difficult to be able to try something new if you're locked into contracts or you know, some sort of some sort of agreement that makes moving away from the norm a challenge. Trying something new could be challenging. Or maybe there's a significant learning curve or a challenging procurement process in order to be able to address and try things out that deviate from the norm. And then, you know, conversely, these are sort of the types of typical game creators that maybe we would be thinking about trying to produce, you know, value for. You know, if a product is able to you know, improve efficiencies or save time, money, or effort, surely that could be something that's seen as quite an important gain. Maybe it produces outcomes that far exceed expectations. You know, I think most of us at UFI, or all of us at UFI, should I say, are mostly confident that VocTech has the potential to produce outcomes that exceed expectations. You know, maybe it produces just-in-time learning that just wasn't available otherwise. Maybe it provides access to new learning resources that mean that it's more flexible and dynamic. You're able to consume them at any time that's convenient to you. Maybe that wasn't available to learners or learning providers before. Maybe the game produces and fulfills, you know, an aspiration or desire, or it really does nail and solve the problem that was first identified. And then, you know, when we're talking about these barriers, when we're thinking about the persona profiles we talked earlier on and the saboteurs, you know, what are the sorts of things that that this innovation does to help make adoption easier or make work and life easier? So I guess the reason why I'm saying talking through pain points and game creators is these are all different potential aspects of how value is created, right? It's not just about, does it improve learning outcomes? Does it improve, you know, or does it satisfy a learning objective in a new way? There are all these other sorts of facets and areas which value can be created that, you know, can amplify the impact and value that the new approach to teaching and learning actually offers. So if you are a tech team, or if you are looking to adopt a new technology, oops, what's happened here? Whoops.
Accessibility options.
Hang on, guys. Sorry about this. My computer's just gone on the fritz.
Use the tab key to navigate and press space to talk.
Wow. What?
Accessibility options.
Hey guys, I'm not sure if you can see this, but my screen has just gone blank. Faye, I don't know what's happening here. I'm really sorry. It seems like I've had a challenge. Hold on.
Hi, Chris. I'll share my screen so I can show the end slide.
Yeah, I mean, I've only got a couple more slides. I'm so sorry. My screen has just literally gone blank. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Okay, which slide would you like to go from?
I'm on the customer check. I'm not sure what the number is, but I'm on the customer insights checklist. I'm probably 2 or 3 slides away from the end. How random. So Faye, have you got the slide up by any chance?
I've got the end slide.
I think we should be just a couple of slides from the end actually.
Yeah, it's not letting me go back.
Oh no.
Let's try again.
This is almost a brand new laptop as well. See, this is some of the issues, right? Technology, it has a habit of sometimes going wrong at the most awkward of moments. Even those of us that are willing to accept products and services that don't work perfectly well. I would expect this laptop to work perfectly well though, since it's almost brand new.
Okay, customer insights checklist.
Fabulous, thank you. So just picking up, and please bear with me because I can't see what I'm looking at, but if you're looking to develop innovation, or you're looking to try out new things, it's useful to understand what are those pains that your customers have, and which ones are the ones that are most important to them, or which are the ones that are the most frustrating, which are the jobs or the things that they need to do and try to address, which are the jobs they need to do most frequently, or which are the jobs that they that matter the most to them. Similarly with gains, what are the most important gains? Which are the ones that are most important to them? But it's also worth trying to understand what are the extremities of these pain points and these potential gains. Like, they might not happen very frequently, but you know, in the instant, like let's give my laptop breaking right now. It might not happen very frequently, but the fact that the laptop has, you know, the screen cease to work right now is a fairly extreme, infrequent issue that has the potential to derail this webinar. So, you know, understanding what are these sorts of pain points or potential gain creators that are in the extremes, in the ranges, in the boundaries, it is a useful to understand. Because, you know, as I said, they might not be that frequent, but they could be very, very impactful if they happen. Okay, so Faye, if we move on to the next slide, what I might need you to do, because I can't remember the 8 steps off the top of my head, could you perhaps read the first step and then I'll just talk these through?
Sure. Okay, so we're going through method, customer insights. So the number 1, adopt a KISS approach. Keep it stupidly simple.
Yeah. So this is all about how do you kind of test? How do you understand what are the things that matter most to your audience or the people that you're trying to impact? So it's useful to take you know, an interview approach, right? Just having a conversation with people, and a number of people, is going to produce a lot of insights that is going to help you to better understand their needs and their perspectives, to do the empathizing, that first stage as part of the design thinking methodology. So keep it stupidly simple. I think all too often, you know, if you're going to be asked questions, or you're going to be asked to complete a survey or a questionnaire, it's really easy just to say no because it's going to take a lot of time, or you think it's going to take a lot more time than maybe it actually does. So for those that are creating the surveys and the questionnaires or the interview structure, keeping the process stupidly simple so that it's limited to just a few questions. It's not going to take up a great deal of time with colleagues that are going to be responding to you. It's really important that that the language is in such a way that it doesn't create any cognitive barriers. They don't have to question what is it that the person is asking me here. That's an important first step. What's the next one, Faye?
Okay, number 2, find a few real life people from your target persona group.
Yeah, so, you know, thinking about you've got a few questions together. You've got an idea of who you want to ask. You need to go and find a few people, you know, just maybe 2 or 3, or just a very small number of people that you can have a conversation with and to ask these questions. I would always recommend, in the first instance, having a chat over a cup of tea or coffee, or, you know, a virtual beverage in these current conditions, right? And then, you know, literally having an initial conversation. So very much just a chat where you're as I said, trying to empathize, ask them very simple questions that you can get some very invaluable insights from. Moving on, Faye.
Okay, number 3, interview them each over a cup of coffee.
Yeah, so we've covered off that step.
And then number 4, send questionnaires to more in the persona group.
Yeah, great. So once you've had a handful of conversations, that should give you some very sort of lead indicating insights into, whether your assumptions have been validated, whether the pains that you think that your customers or users have are actually indeed the ones that they do have, that you better understand, the extremities and the range of pains of potential gain creators that they're looking for. Once you've done that with a couple of people and you've had those few conversations, it's really sensible to maybe further confirm those assumptions. And you can create a very short online survey, for example, using the likes of Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or any number of tools to create a questionnaire to then send out to people. Now, I know that I said earlier on, the majority of people or a lot of people will choose to not contribute to a questionnaire because it takes too much time. So it's useful just to set the scene and say, this is only going to take a minute of your time, guys, and keep the questions just to a very, very limited number. And this leads on to the next point. You're asking the questions and asking your audience to respond to what extent is the following an issue to them, or to what extent is it that important to them, with a range scale and response that gives you some quantitative data. So like a scale range of sort of 7 different points on this on the scale, the point 1 being the least important, the point 7 being the most important. And if you do that with a number of questions, and you're asking the survey in this way, you're going to get some really good quantitative data that can tell you how important these problems are and these statements are to the audience member that you're asking. Cool, Faye, can we move on?
Yeah, so should we move to the next slide?
Oh, we're all done now, Wade. So I think that's pretty much the end of the presentation, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's the end slide I'm just showing now.
Thank you very much. I would like to open to any questions. Thanks for your attention today, and apologies for the technical hiccup. I'm going to try to address that as soon as I get off the call. And yeah, that was a basic introduction to design thinking, looking at the design thinking methodology, the double diamond methodology, how to create a quick persona, and the different types of personas you might deal with, and then how to do sort of customer insights testing at lightning pace.
That's great, thanks, Chris.
Welcome.
Manjinder, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything. At the moment, we're just waiting for people to send in any questions if they want anything answered by Chris.
Yeah, that was an absolutely great webinar. I think it's really, really useful topic to discuss with our audience, just in terms of user testing and approaching moving on to online, because sometimes people think you can just dump whatever you were doing face to face online without actually thinking about the design process and how things need to change. So yeah, really, really useful. I can see that we've got some comments coming in. Thank you, really useful from Evie. From my perspective, one thing that I would like maybe Chris to just expand upon is when you're talking about the customer personas, is just maybe give an example of how trainers have different stakeholders involved as well. So I know that we spoke of it in a more sort of product focused way.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I didn't want to double down too much on the different personas during the presentation. I was hoping that they would come up in the discussion. But if we think about you know, I'll give a couple. I'll almost ask a couple of questions, rhetorical questions, if you like, because we haven't got the time. But if we think about this concept of an influencer, what's an influencer? So I think today, in today's current context, everybody defaults that, oh, it must be an Instagram influencer or a social media influencer. Well, you know, I think we can consider UFI as an influencer, right? UFI, we have a share of voice and a large audience that reaches out into you know, the wider industry and vocational learning contexts. And you know, projects that get funded by UFI, you know, UFI has a bit of a duty of care to advocate and to some extent promote the innovations that we're funding, right? So in that instance, you know, the sorts of the persona that UFI sort of embodies would be considered as an influencer. Likewise, trade associations and membership organisations for a sector, they are the ones that have networks and that carry influence amongst those networks, right? These are all, you know, organisations and sort of instances that if you're part of that network, then maybe they're able to advocate and help to promote and evangelise your good work. You know, similarly, you know, we think about the recommender profile. You know, recommenders could be outsourced IT consultants, for example, or you know, they could be people that are tasked within a college or, you know, an organisation to assess all of the different solutions that are out there. The procurement managers, for example, or you know, it could be the learning and development managers or HR people, or as I said, IT consultants, for example. In a lot of instances, organisations that don't consider themselves to be particularly innovative often need to take those recommendations from those that position themselves as sorts of savants in the space, right? So yeah, so recommenders again would be you know, are a nuanced profile, but again, if you're understanding what a recommender constitutes, creating a profile for those sorts of people, and understanding what drives them and what their needs are and what their motivations for trying to deliver value are, is a useful exercise. You know, buyers, I don't think we really need to cover that. That's just generally any customers. Decision makers, you know, you think about who sits where in the value chain or in your sphere of knowledge. You know, who is it that ultimately has has the authority and the power to be able to make the decision and buy the product and service that you're looking to either procure or promote. And you know, and again, when we think about end users, it's everybody from the actual learner themselves through to all of the other sorts of staff and stakeholders that you might come across. I mean, if I'll give you another example of the saboteur, and I think this is, you know, and please don't, or forgive me for being crass, but I think there's you know, a fairly large slice of the educator audience that could be considered saboteurs, because you know, teaching and learning, teaching is a very difficult job, and often you just don't have the time to be able to be up to speed on all of the new types of digital learning approaches that are available. You might even be nervous that the robot is coming to eat your job. And I mean, you know, for someone like me, I think we're no closer to robots replacing teachers than we are to flying cars. Right? That's my genuine opinion. Even though I like to try all the newfangled technologies, I just don't think anybody can replace, you know, entirely the role of the human teacher.
Absolutely agree, Kriss. And I think using technology to make those trainers, those teachers' lives easier is the key factor, really.
The enabler, people are the driver.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? I'm just putting it out to the audience. There's not many that have come in. If there aren't, just a couple of notices. I'm just going to go through the upcoming webinars. So the first thing I'd like to mention is that we've got a repeat of this webinar on May the 19th at 2:30. So if you want to either rejoin or you want to recommend somebody else to join, do join us on Tuesday the 19th at 2:30 for that. And then we have another one which is on May the 21st, which is how to design learning for online delivery with Daniel Whiston at 10:30 in the morning. That one is. You can find all of the registration details on the UFI website, but we will also be sending out a email to all the attendees so that you can register for those as well. And if you'd like to hear about more of the work that we're doing, and if you'd like to stay in touch with us, it would be great if you could sign up to our newsletter, because just by signing up to the webinar doesn't mean that we can contact you with either funding calls or further resources. If you sign up to our newsletter, it means that we can stay in touch. We've just had a message from Joanna. She just wanted to say that she found this session really practical. Thank you very much. And some really nice comments coming back, and we really do hope that you found it really useful. I know that I like stopping and thinking about design thinking. I think it's the key to any type of design in any part of life. And thank you, Kriss.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.